My wife was sleeping with her boss to get a promotion at work, so I broke up with her, but she won't stop trying to make me forgive her. Immediately after being hired at her law firm, my wife started getting promoted a lot. This was a little strange, as I knew promotions were not so easy to come by in this job. One day I made a joke to her about banging the boss for these promotions. My joke was met with aggressiveness and her storming off. That night, while she slept, I went through her phone and discovered the reason she was so defensive about my joke. She was indeed banging the boss in exchange for favorable treatment. There was a message between them about how much he loved her going down on him under the table during his video call. The next morning, I couldn't bring myself to speak to her. I just went about my day in silence, avoiding eye contact and feeling a churning pit in my stomach. For days, I lived in a state of denial. I couldn't bring myself to confront Renee. I was scared that acknowledging the truth would destroy our life together. I continued to go through the motions, pretending everything was normal while the weight of the knowledge crushed me. My wife, Renee, seemed oblivious to my inner turmoil. She acted like nothing had happened, continuing to shower me with affection and surprises. One evening, she came home with an unexpected gift: 2 tickets to Dubai. This was a surprise she claimed was thanks to a recent work bonus. I snapped. I instantly dropped the facade. I told Renee that I couldn't do this anymore. She looked confused and asked what I was talking about. I dropped the truth on her and told her I knew about her and her boss, Tim, and why he was giving her those bonuses. I showed her some of the screenshots I took of their conversations. There was a message from Tim a few weeks back, complimenting her appearance, her performance, and hinting at their next encounter. My stomach churned, but I kept reading. Renee's responses showed she enjoyed their time together and was willing to meet his requests. The messages became more explicit as I continued scrolling. Tim detailed what he wanted from her in their next encounter, and my hands shook as I read his words. Renee had responded with eagerness, confirming she would love to. Further up the thread, I found messages from months ago, just after she started the job. Tim hinted at her potential for rapid advancement and suggested that she could move up quickly with his help. Renee's replies were immediate and eager, showing she was willing to do whatever it took to succeed. It was a spiral of degrading requests from Tim and Renee's compliant, almost eager responses. These requests ranged from oral sex under the table to ropes, to feet fetishes and more. There were photos, 2 selfies of Renee in various states, sent to Tim with playful captions meant for his eyes only. I felt like I was going to be sick. The woman I loved, the woman I thought I knew, had been betraying me in the worst way imaginable. Her face was pale. I asked her why she would do this and what she was thinking. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She realized she was caught, and there was no denying it. I couldn't bear to stay in the house that night, so I packed a bag and left. I ended up staying at my best friend Mike's place. Mike was all ears as I told him everything about Renee. He told me that I deserved better and needed to leave her. I knew he was right. The next day I returned home, packed more of my belongings, and moved in with Mike. I wasn't ready to see a divorce lawyer yet, but I needed space and time to think. Renee, meanwhile, was relentless. She called and texted constantly, begging for a chance to explain. Every time I looked at her, I saw the messages, the photos, and the lies. It was a betrayal I never saw coming, and it left me questioning everything about our life together. One Saturday afternoon, as I was leaving Mike's apartment, I found Renee standing at the door. Her eyes were red and puffy, looking smaller and more fragile than I had ever seen her. "Can we talk?" she asked. I hesitated but stepped aside, letting her in. We sat down in the living room, the air feeling thick. Renee took a deep breath and started explaining how she knew she hurt me. She said she made a terrible mistake and was scared of losing her job. She thought that if she did what Tim wanted, she could secure our future. I wanted to lash out, but I stayed silent and waited for her to continue. She admitted she was ashamed and didn't want me to think less of her. She said she thought she could handle it on her own and went on about how sorry she was. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with tears, and told me she loved me and would do anything to make it right. She then told me she quit the job and cut off all contact with Tim. She claimed she wanted to start over and rebuild our life together and continued to beg for another chance. I told her that I needed time and that I wasn't interested in continuing our relationship. I wanted to believe her, but the pain was still too fresh. She told me she would give me as much time as I needed, and ended our conversation by telling me she loved me and would never stop trying to make things right. As she left, I felt a lingering pain, her words echoing in my mind. She promised she would do anything for a chance to rebuild what was broken, but I was too hurt and angry to consider reconciliation. My days blurred into a monotonous routine. I went to work, came home to Mike's apartment, and tried to distract myself with television or books. Nothing could erase the image of those text messages from my mind. I tried to distract myself by diving into work, hoping that the busyness would drown out the thoughts. But even at the office, I couldn't concentrate. I found myself obsessively checking my own phone, half expecting another blow to come through. I replayed every interaction I had with Renee over the past few months, searching for signs I might have missed. I felt like a fool for not seeing it sooner. Meals at Mike's were silent affairs. He offered support in his own way, giving me space yet always being nearby. During dinner, he would initiate conversation, trying to pull me out of my thoughts, but my responses were short. On weekends, Mike suggested we go out, grab a drink, catch a game, anything to get me out of the apartment, but I often declined, preferring the solitude of the spare bedroom where I could reflect in peace. One evening, he found me sitting in the dark, my face buried in my hands. Without a word, he handed me a drink and sat beside me. Weeks turned into months, and Renee's persistence didn't stop. She sent letters, left gifts, and even showed up at my workplace, all in an effort to win me back. I ignored the gifts, letters, and her presence. I didn't want to be bothered by her anymore. On what would have been our wedding anniversary, Renee made a grand gesture. She decorated the park where we had our first date, filling it with candles and roses. She stood in the middle holding a sign that read, "I'm so sorry. Please give us another chance." My heart ached as I looked at her. She was visibly emotional. I saw genuine hope, remorse, and desperation in her eyes. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of the love we once shared. I froze, unable to process the scene in front of me. Renee looked fragile, her eyes red and swollen, her hands trembling as she held the sign. As I approached, she lowered the sign and began to speak. She said she knew she didn't deserve my forgiveness and that she had done everything she could to show how sorry she was. She said she loved me more than anything and was willing to spend the rest of her life proving that to me. The air was heavy with the scent of roses and the flickering light of the candles. I looked around, taking in the effort she had put into this gesture. It was overwhelming, but what struck me most was the genuine sorrow and desperation in her eyes. I told her I would give her one more chance, but this was it. If she ever betrayed me again, we were done. Renee's face crumpled as she let out a sob of relief. She wrapped her arms around me and clung to me as if I might disappear, thanking me repeatedly and promising she would never hurt me again. Renee broke down, sobbing with relief and gratitude. I held her, feeling a mixture of hope and apprehension. We had a long road ahead, but for the first time in months, I was excited for our future. A few days later, Renee and I decided to attend couples therapy. Mike said it would be a good thing for us. We started working through our issues with our therapist. The sessions were intense and often emotionally draining, but I knew they'd pay off in the long run. I learned to express my pain and anger without fear of judgment, while Renee confronted the deep-seated insecurities that had led her to betray me. Our therapist, Dr. Roberts, guided us through the process. During one session, she compared trust to a vase. Once it's broken, she said, it can be put back together, but it will never be the same. She emphasized that we both needed to decide if we were willing to work on putting the pieces back together. Renee was unwavering in her commitment. She cut off all contact with Tim and her former workplace and found a new job where she could start fresh. She made a point of being transparent with me about her whereabouts and actions, knowing that earning my trust back would take time and consistency. I, in turn, worked on letting go of the bitterness that had built up inside me. I began to see Renee's efforts and sincerity, slowly allowing myself to believe that she truly regretted her actions. There were still moments of doubt and hurt, but each day brought us closer to healing. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, Renee turned to me and took my hand. She said she knew she couldn't change the past but promised to spend the rest of her life making it up to me. I squeezed her hand, feeling a warmth in my chest. I told her I believed her and wanted to move forward together. From that moment on, our relationship began to heal. It wasn't easy, and there were still days when the pain resurfaced, but we were committed to each other and to rebuilding our lives together. We took things one day at a time, celebrating the small victories and leaning on each other during the tough moments. As the months turned into years, Renee and I found a new rhythm in our relationship. We continued with therapy, both individually and as a couple, and the open communication we developed became the foundation of our renewed trust. We learned to be vulnerable with each other, sharing our fears and insecurities without judgment. Renee's new job was less demanding, allowing her to spend more time at home. We started new traditions like weekly date nights and weekend getaways to keep our bond strong. Slowly but surely, the pain of the past began to fade, replaced by a deeper, more resilient love. Then, one evening, Renee came to me with tears in her eyes. "I'm pregnant," she whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and excitement. I was stunned, but a wave of joy quickly washed over me. I wrapped her in my arms, feeling a surge of love and hope for our future. "We're going to be parents," I said. "I love you, Renee." The news of Renee's pregnancy marked a new chapter in our lives. We threw ourselves into preparing for the arrival of our baby, attending prenatal classes, setting up the nursery, and dreaming about the future. The anticipation brought us even closer, and we felt a renewed sense of purpose and commitment to each other. When our daughter Lily was born, it was the happiest day of our lives. Holding her in my arms for the first time, I felt an overwhelming sense of love and gratitude. Renee and I had been through so much, but we had come out stronger on the other side. 5 years had passed since that fateful night when I discovered Renee's betrayal. Our lives had changed in ways I could never have imagined. We had faced the darkest moments of our relationship and emerged stronger, our love deeper and more resilient than ever. We now had a beautiful 2-year-old daughter, Lily, who brought immeasurable joy into our lives. Update: I can't believe I'm writing this, but I'm sad to say that all the friends who knew about my marriage were correct. Once a cheater, always a cheater is a phrase one have heard a lot in my life, but I honestly thought Renee was different. I thought she would never do anything like that again. Well, I was wrong. She was cheating on me with an old ex from college who just happened to move an hour or so drive away from us and contacted her on her IG. She couldn't resist it. I saw her messages. She said it was going to be a one-time thing, but then after it she told him he was too good in bed for her not to go back to him, and so she started an affair. I found out because she started working a lot of overtime and on the weekends when we'd spend time with our daughter. She was usually catching up with her friends. She was doing things like this way too often, and although I'd like to think I did trust her, something compelled me to go through her phone. I won't be so stupid again. I won't be taking her back. She can stand on the highest rooftop and use the world's largest megaphone to yell she loves me as loud as she could, and I'm still not taking her back. We are over. I will be filing for divorce.